told her to leave the suitcase on the porch and get in the truck. The gray pickup rolled up the driveway and I was already stepping down from the cab before my boots hit the gravel. My granddaughter was sitting on the top step with a stuffed rabbit clutched against her chest, her little face streaked with the kind of dried tears that tell you a child has cried herself empty. My daughter stood behind her, holding a cardboard box of groceries she hadn't been allowed to unpack. She looked at me the way you look at land after a flood, trying to figure out what's still yours. "Mom," she whispered. I didn't know where else to go. I didn't say anything right away. I just walked past her, picked up my granddaughter, and carried her to the truck. I strapped her into the booster seat I keep in the back for exactly this kind of emergency, though I never told anyone I kept it there. Then I came back for the suitcase and the box of groceries and my daughter, and I put all three in the truck in that order, because that's what mattered most to least. She kept looking at me like she expected me to fall apart. I wasn't going to fall apart. I was 67 years old and I had been preparing for a moment like this for 40 years, though I hadn't known it. Every hard decision, every quiet savings account, every night I bit my tongue at some man's dinner table. It was all saving up into a reservoir, and now the dam was coming down. "Where are we going, Grandma?" my granddaughter asked. "Home," I said. "Whose home?" "Mine," which means yours. The drive out to my place takes 40 minutes if you obey the speed limit, which I usually don't. But that day, I did because I didn't want my granddaughter to be any more scared than she already was. My daughter stared out the passenger window at the cottonwood trees and the dry creek beds, and she didn't speak until we were almost to my gate. "He said I was a freeloader," she said. "He said I came from nothing and I'd go back to nothing. He said his son deserved better than the daughter of some widow who cleans houses." "Is that what he thinks I do?" "That's what he told Daniel." Daniel was my son-in-law, a sweet young man, weak the way good-looking men sometimes are, raised by a father who confused cruelty with strength. I had always known his father was going to be a problem. I just hadn't known he was going to be this kind of problem. And Daniel said, "What?" She didn't answer for a long time. Then she said, "Daniel wasn't home. He's been on that job in Houston for 3 weeks. His father came over this morning with his lawyer. He had papers. He said the house was in his name, not ours, and that if I didn't leave by noon, he'd call the sheriff and say I was trespassing. And where is Daniel now? I can't reach him. His phone goes to voicemail." His father said Daniel already knew, that they talked about it last night. I nodded once, then kept driving. In my experience, when a man who controls the finances says another man already knew, he means that man was told. Told, not asked. Daniel had probably woken up in his hotel room in Houston to a phone call informing him that his wife was no longer welcome in the house his father had put in his name as a wedding gift. A gift, you understand. That's what we call a leash when it's tied with a ribbon. I pulled up to my gate and keyed in the code. The gate swung open slow, the way I like it, and my granddaughter pressed her nose against the window. "Grandma, you have horses." "I have 2 horses and a mule." "Can I pet them?" "After supper. Right now we're going to get you fed and settled." My daughter looked at the long gravel drive and the white fencing and the stand of pecan trees I'd planted the year she was born. She had been out to visit maybe a dozen times in her adult life, and she had never looked at the place the way she looked at it now, like she was seeing it for the first time and realizing she didn't understand it. "Mom," she said, "how many acres is this?" "Enough." "I thought you rented." "I did. For a long time. Then I didn't." She was quiet the rest of the way up to the house. That night, after my granddaughter was asleep in the guest room under a quilt my own mother had stitched, I sat at the kitchen table with my daughter and a pot of chamomile tea, and I let her cry until she was done crying. I didn't rush her. I didn't say it would be okay. I have learned over the course of a long life that when a woman is crying over a man, the worst thing you can do is tell her it's going to be fine, because she's not crying about whether it will be fine. She's crying because she already knows it won't be, and she's grieving the version of her life she thought she was living. When she was finally quiet, I poured her another cup and I said, "Tell me everything from the beginning." So she did. She told me that my son-in-law's father, I'll call him the old man because that's what his own employees called him behind his back, had handled their finances since before the wedding. He paid for the ceremony. He bought them the house. He'd set up Daniel's job at the family construction firm, and he'd made my daughter a courtesy hire in the company's accounting department, a job she was overqualified for, but that he insisted on because, as he put it, family takes care of family. What he meant, of course, was family watches family. She told me that for 5 years she'd watched him run that firm into the ground while skimming from the top. She'd seen invoices that didn't match bank statements. She'd seen payments to contractors that didn't exist. She'd seen her own signature forged on documents she'd never touched. When she finally went to Daniel about it, Daniel had sighed and said, "Dad has his ways. Don't poke the bear." She told me that 2 weeks ago she'd found something worse. She'd found a second set of books, not digital, paper in a locked drawer in the old man's private office, which she'd had access to for exactly 11 minutes one afternoon while he was stuck in traffic. She'd photographed every page. She'd hidden the photos on a cloud drive with a password nobody knew but her. And then, 4 days later, she'd been locked out of the company email system. Her key card stopped working. Security walked her to her car. And this morning, the old man had shown up at her house with his lawyer and said, "Your bloodline isn't worthy of my son's name. Take your daughter and go back to whatever trailer you crawled out of." She told me this with her hands wrapped around her teacup and her eyes focused on the grain of my kitchen table. I listened to all of it, every word. I did not interrupt her once. When she was finished, I said, "Where are those photographs?" "On the drive. I have the password memorized." "Good girl." "Mom, he has lawyers. He has everyone. The sheriff is his fishing buddy. The judge is his wife's cousin. I can't fight him. I don't have anything." I stood up, walked over to the hutch against the wall, and took down the old wooden box my late husband had made for me the year we got married. I brought it back to the table and set it in front of her. I didn't open it yet. "Listen to me," I said. "When your father passed, I told you he left me comfortable. Do you remember?" "Yes." Comfortable is a word I chose on purpose. I didn't want you to grow up entitled, and I didn't want any man you brought home thinking I was a meal ticket. So I let you believe I was getting by. I let you believe I rented this place. I let you believe I drove that old truck because I couldn't afford better. None of that was true. She lifted her eyes. "Your father and I built something," I said. "We started with nothing. We ended with quite a lot. After he died, I kept building. Quietly. I am not a woman who announces what she owns. But I own it, sweetheart. I own all of it." "Mom, what are you saying?" I opened the box then. Inside were 3 folders. Not flashy, not bound in leather, just plain manila folders. The kind you buy at any office supply store. I took out the top one and slid it across the table. She opened it. She read the first page. She read the second. She turned to the third, and her hand started to shake. "Mom?" she whispered. This is Daniel's company." "No, sweetheart. This is the company Daniel's father claims is his. I bought the controlling interest 18 months ago through a holding firm. The old man doesn't know. He's been reporting to a board he thinks is anonymous. Institutional investors. The institutional investor is me." She stared at me. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want to color your marriage. A woman has a right to find out on her own whether her husband's family is rotten. You found out. Now we're going to do something about it." She was crying again, but this time different. Not grief crying. The other kind. I poured us both more tea. The next morning, I made 3 phone calls before my granddaughter was awake. The first was to a woman named Miriam, who had been my husband's personal attorney and, after his death, mine. Miriam was 71 years old, had defended 2 governors and 1 cardinal, and owed me exactly 1 favor that I had been saving for the better part of a decade. I told her what I needed. She said, "About time," and hung up. The second call was to a forensic accountant in Dallas who had once worked for the IRS and now worked for people like me. I gave him the cloud drive password and told him to verify everything by end of week. He said he'd have it by Thursday. The third call was to my son-in-law Daniel, who answered on the second ring from his hotel in Houston. "Mom, Ellen," he said, and his voice cracked. "I've been trying to call her. She won't pick up. She's safe. She's with me." "Oh, thank God. Thank God." Mom, Ellen, I don't know what to do," Dad said. "Daniel, I'm going to ask you one question, and I need you to answer it honestly. Did you know what your father was planning?" A long silence. "I knew he didn't like her," he finally said. "I knew he wanted her out of the company. I didn't know he wanted her out of the company. I didn't know he was going to throw her out of the house. I swear to God, I would never—" "Did he call you last night?" "Yes." "And what did you say?" Another silence, longer this time. I told him I needed to think. I was going to fly home today. Mom, Ellen, I am such a coward. I have been a coward my whole life about him. I thought if I just kept my head down, he'd— "Daniel, stop talking." He stopped. "I am going to tell you what is about to happen," I said. "You can choose to stand with your wife and your daughter, or you can choose to stand with your father. You cannot do both. By the time you land in Austin tomorrow, your father is going to be facing a situation he has never been in before in his life, and you are going to have about 4 hours to decide which side of the line you're on. I suggest you use your flight to think about what kind of man you want your daughter to grow up knowing. Mom, Ellen, Don't tell me. Tell her. And Daniel, whatever you decide, don't lie to me. I will find out. I always find out." I hung up. Miriam arrived the next afternoon in a black SUV driven by a young man in a dark suit. She carried a briefcase the color of oxblood, and she wore lipstick the same shade. She kissed my cheek on the porch and said, "I brought you a present." From the briefcase, she drew a thin stack of papers and handed them to me. It was a board resolution. I signed it on the porch railing. "Emergency shareholder meeting," she said. "Tuesday morning, 10 a.m., at the firm's Austin offices. The old man has to attend. He has no idea it's been called." "Who's gonna chair?" "Me, as counsel for the controlling interest." "And the other board members?" "2 of them resigned yesterday. The third is about 2. Their replacements have been selected." "Selected by who?" Miriam smiled. "By the controlling interest." I smiled back. That afternoon, my daughter sat at my kitchen table with the forensic accountant's preliminary report spread out in front of her. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. She was circling numbers in red pen, cross-referencing them with the photographs from the cloud drive. She had stopped being a woman in shock and had started being what she really was, which was a damn good accountant with 5 years of receipts and a very long memory. "Mom," she said without looking up, "he's been stealing from the retirement fund." "I know. The workers' retirement fund. Men who've been with the firm 30 years. He's been borrowing against it to cover his own losses." "I know. This isn't just a civil case. This is federal." "I know, sweetheart. That's why Miriam is here." She looked up at me then. "You knew all of this already." "I suspected." "You confirmed. How long have you suspected?" "Since the day he welcomed you to the family by telling me at your wedding reception that he hoped our side of the aisle wouldn't embarrass the family with a dance routine. I knew then what kind of man he was. I just needed him to prove it in writing." Tuesday morning was clear and cold. I drove into Austin in my old truck because I like my old truck, but I put on a charcoal wool suit I hadn't worn in 6 years and a string of pearls my husband gave me on our 20th anniversary. My daughter rode in the passenger seat in a navy dress. My granddaughter stayed home with my neighbor, who used to be a kindergarten teacher and who had promised pancakes. We parked in the visitor's lot of the construction firm's headquarters. It was a glass and steel building the old man had put up 8 years ago with what he called the firm's reserves, which turned out, the forensic accountant confirmed Monday night, to have been financed largely by those workers' retirement contributions. We walked in through the front doors. The receptionist looked up, startled. She recognized my daughter. She stammered something about not having an appointment. Miriam was already waiting in the lobby. She stood up and said calmly, "They do have an appointment. It's the board meeting. I believe Mr. Propping. Halverson is already upstairs." "Halverson?" That was his name. I haven't used it until now because I didn't want to give him the dignity, but let's use it now. It's going in the court documents either way. We took the elevator up to the 8th floor. The boardroom doors were closed. Miriam opened them without knocking. Inside, at the head of a long walnut table, sat the old man. He was red-faced and mid-sentence, haranguing two people I didn't recognize. When he saw my daughter, his mouth opened. When he saw me, he stopped breathing for a moment. "Who," he said, "let you in?" "The controlling interest," said Miriam, and she stepped aside so I could walk in first. I took the seat at the opposite end of the table. My daughter sat on my right. Miriam sat on my left. The two strangers, the new board members Miriam had selected, sat across from us. "This meeting," Miriam said, "is now called to order." Halverson stood up. "This is absurd. This is my firm. You are a minority shareholder in this firm. You have been for 18 months. You were not informed because the controlling interest preferred anonymity. That preference has now ended." He looked at me. For a long second, he didn't recognize me out of context. Then he did. "You," he said. "The mother. The widow. The controlling interest," I said. "Sit down, sir." He did not sit down. "The first item on the agenda," Miriam continued, "is the removal of the current CEO for cause. The cause being embezzlement from the Employee Retirement Fund, forgery of corporate documents, and wrongful termination of an employee in violation of federal protected class statutes." "Protected class," Halverson sputtered. "What protected class?" "Your daughter-in-law," Miriam said, "is a woman, and her report of financial irregularities, which you retaliated against, constitutes protected whistleblower activity under federal law. The termination of her employment following her discovery of your second set of books is actionable under multiple statutes. We have the books. We have the timeline. We have the forged signatures. We also have, as of this morning, a sealed indictment from the United States Attorney's Office for the Western District of Texas." He actually sat down that time. His legs just gave out. "Sealed," he whispered. "Until noon today," Miriam said, "after which it will be unsealed. The federal marshals are downstairs. They have been courteous enough to allow this meeting to conclude first, as a professional courtesy to me." He looked at my daughter. "You did this." My daughter looked back at him, and I have never been prouder of her than I was in that moment. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She just looked at him the way you look at a snake you've finally gotten a shovel behind. "No," she said. "You did this." I just took pictures. The door opened. Daniel walked in. He'd flown in on the red-eye. His suit was wrinkled and his eyes were hollowed out. He looked at his father. He looked at his wife. He looked at me. Then he walked around the long table and sat down next to his wife, on her right, opposite his father. He took her hand. "Dad," he said, in a voice that sounded older than I'd ever heard it. "I should have stood up to you 10 years ago. I'm sorry it took this." Halverson stared at his son like he'd been slapped. "You are my blood," he said. "So is she," Daniel answered, and he put his other hand, gentle, on my daughter's shoulder. "And so is our daughter. And they are worth more than your name." The old man had no answer for that. He had spent his whole life believing blood was the thing you used to bully people. He had never once considered that blood was the thing you used to protect them. Miriam moved the motion. The vote was 3-1. Halverson was removed as CEO effective immediately. My daughter was reinstated with back pay to a newly created position of Chief Financial Officer, reporting directly to the board. Daniel was offered the CEO role on an interim basis, which he accepted on the condition that he be evaluated after 90 days like any other candidate. The federal marshals came upstairs at 2 minutes past noon. Halverson did not resist. He did not speak. He walked out, between them in his tailored suit with his head down, and the receptionist in the lobby, who had worked there for 11 years and who, we later learned, had been one of the workers whose retirement he'd been looting, watched him go with the quietest, most satisfied expression I have ever seen on a human face. The trial took 8 months, which is about how long these things actually take. I say this because some people get impatient with justice and expect it to move at the speed of television. It doesn't. Justice moves at the speed of paperwork, and paperwork is slow. But it arrives. He was convicted on 14 federal counts. He is currently serving 11 years at a minimum security facility outside Bastrop. The stolen retirement funds were recovered with interest through the sale of his personal assets. The workers got their money back. A few of them cried when the checks arrived. One of them, a foreman who had been with the firm for 31 years, drove 2 hours out to my ranch to shake my hand. I told him to shake my daughter's hand instead. He did. Then he shook mine anyway. My daughter is still the CFO, Daniel is still the CEO, and he has grown into the job in a way that surprises even me. He goes to counseling every Wednesday. He has told me more than once that finding out his father had been stealing from working men was the moment he realized his whole idea of strength had been backwards. Strength, he said, isn't making other people smaller. Strength is what you use to make room for them. I told him that was a good line and he should write it down. My granddaughter is 8 now. She rides the mule. She calls my ranch our place, which is correct because after I'm gone, it will be hers. I have not told her this yet. Some inheritances are better received than announced. I am telling you this story because last week I got a letter from a woman in Oregon whose mother-in-law is doing to her something similar to what Halverson did to my daughter. Different flavor, same recipe. Isolation, financial control, a house in someone else's name, a job inside the family that was really a leash, a steady drumbeat of you are not worthy, you are not good enough, you should be grateful we tolerate you. I want you to hear me, whoever you are watching this. These men, and sometimes these women, are not rare. They are not monsters in a fairy tale. They are bullies in expensive clothes, and they have been getting away with it for generations because we have been taught to admire them. We have been taught that a man who controls his family's money is a good provider. We have been taught that a woman who keeps the peace is virtuous. We have been taught that family is sacred even when family is poisoning you. Family is not sacred. Love is sacred. And love does not humiliate you at the dinner table. Love does not forge your signature. Love does not throw you out with your child and your suitcases on a Tuesday morning while the man who vowed to protect you is conveniently 3 states away. If someone in your life is doing this to you, I want you to do 3 things. First, write everything down. Dates, times, what was said, what was spent, a notebook under your mattress if you have to. Second, make one friend outside the family. 1. Someone who does not owe the bully anything. Third, believe, even if you can't see how yet, that there is a way out. There is always a way out. It may take a year. It may take 10. It took me 40, quietly building a reservoir I didn't know I was going to need. And if you're a mother or a grandmother or an aunt or a sister, and you see this happening to someone you love, you don't need a holding company and a forensic accountant to help her. You need a kitchen table, a pot of tea, and the willingness to say, "Come home, sweetheart. You can stay as long as you need." That's where it starts. That's where it started for me. The gray pickup is still in my driveway. The gate still swings open slow. My granddaughter is in the pasture right now, feeding the mule an apple she stole from my kitchen. My daughter is on a conference call in the guest room she hasn't moved out of, even though she could. Daniel is driving up this weekend for Sunday supper, and I'm going to make him the brisket his own father never bothered to teach him to make. And the old man, well, he writes letters sometimes. From Bastrop. I don't open them. I put them in a drawer, unopened. And every now and then I look at that drawer and I remember what my husband told me a long time ago on a porch in East Texas when I was 23 and scared. He said, "Ellen, a woman who knows what she owns is the most dangerous thing on God's green earth. Don't ever let anyone tell you different. I didn't, and neither should you."